Hello everyone, Dergon4 here. I've got another tutorial. This time I'm going to be showing you how to make some user interfaces of sorts. Since recently I've put out the interact and possession system, and now I'm putting out the damage and health system, I figured that I should probably try and do some stuff for user interfaces, which a lot of people will want to know how to tie into these various types of systems. So I ended up coming up with a basic tutorial in order to do more or less just that. In the world display, more or less, people, stats, whatever. In this case, the name, Pokey, and health bar shows up. When you look at it, it gets a bit bigger, and then you also see the title and class, and you could have whatever other stats or things. It's the thing about user interfaces, it's really specific to whatever your own game and needs are, so less of something that I could make a nice pre-done package for, and more of something to just teach you the basic idea of how to do it yourself, and hopefully you can then plug things in. So, with that being said, let's look at what we actually have. The main thing that we need for this is a user interface tutorial, or a UI widget, sorry, I called mine UI tutorial here. So we need a widget, and an interface, blueprint interface. The blueprint interface you get by right-clicking, then there's a blueprints tab, and you click the blueprint interface in that tab. My recording software doesn't really show the pop-up menus and stuff very well, but with that you create a new interface. And for the UI tutorial, you would right-click at the very bottom, user interface, widget blueprint, new widget blueprint, so that's how you create these. For the interface, it's fairly straightforward. In this case, we have functions in this upper right corner. It should be a default something or another. There won't be anything to begin with. In our case, what we're doing is we go to outputs, and we just clicked new outputs a few times in order to create the outputs. So if you need to have stats for your speed, your health, your faction, a title, a class, whatever type of information you want to send, then here on the right, you'll want to make a variable for that. So that is that when this event is first sent, you don't send anything, you just make a request, and then it will send a return where you've got the ability to put in this stuff. So let's go up here to our little target character, which is just, for the most part, your average guy. Nothing really special. In this case, I'd put an arrow around his head and call that UI marker. Doesn't really matter what you call it, just I'm using that in order to roughly get the location that the user interface should be placed. So, for this class settings, and then you'll want to go here and add the interface that you just made. In this case, get info interface. Here you can see the get info interface. Then after that, you'll want to compile, and you have to compile, otherwise these things can kind of break. So the get info, in this case we call this get info, you can tap F2 to rename it. So the get info interface is the name of this whole thing, and then you have a whole bunch of individual functions that can be part of this blueprint interface. So you need to make one of those. Then in this case, yeah, get info, that opens this, and as you can see, because it has a return node, normally if there is no return nodes, then it can just be like a normal event that pops up in your main blueprints area. But if it has a return node, it counts as its own special function, so you have to make it so that all the stuff will happen inside of this function to return. So in this case, name, I just gave Pokey, title, the well-traveled, class, donkey poker, little UI marker, get world location, I use that for the UI location. Then from the health blueprint, which is a component from the health and damage package that I made, you can get your health values from any system you want. You just need some type of values. In this case, I used a current health and max health, and then arbitrary point, again, class, faction, speed, whatever possible stats or things you want to display to the UI, or simply to get for being used for any other actors in general. It doesn't have to be solely for your UI, after all. But the idea is that now whenever someone sends this get info request, this will, whatever you've plugged in, will be returned. So now let's look at the actual player character. On an event tick, I have this thing set up with a getAllActors with interface node, and then the getInterface node. So this will return all actors currently in the world that have this interface in them, which means this guy, because he has, under class settings, the getInfo interface, he will show up. Then a for each loop, and then I end up using a map, which is kind of like an array, but it has two values. So in this case, I've got the first value is for the actor itself, and the second actor is for any user interface widget associated with it. So the idea is that we will look for these actors, and if we've already got them in our array, then we'll move on and update values. We would be, let's just focus on this. If we've got it already in the array, in the map, then we would come down here, and we would get info from that actor. These chains are a bit hard to follow. I'll show over this for a little bit here, and you'll see it comes down to here. So we use the getInfo message using interface, getInfo interface. And then it will have output nodes because it returns this stuff, and we'll take this, and all these output values will plug in to the variables that we have on our user interface. User interface is part of that map attached to the relevant actor. And had we not found it, then it would have created a new tutorial widget, UI tutorial being the name of this user interface. So you could think of this as just a health bar, stat bar, whatever. You create a new one, and then you add it to the local viewport, and then we add it to the array, to the map. Sorry, I'm used to using arrays, not maps as much. So this UI element is now saved along with the actor that it is attached to. And then we also create an array element for another value that we were using with a line trace, because we want to know when we're looking at an actor, are we looking at it? In this case, whatever you're looking at, if you do hit something true, then if that is one of your actor status maps inside of that map, then it will set the array element to true of that same index element value. So you can know which one of these you're looking at, and then you can tell them, hey, you're in focus. So I'm using that in a later point. Also, the UI location part, you'll notice I take that and get the current camera's location, get world location, and then get the vector length after subtracting that from the location that was sent. So this way we know how far we are from that actual thing itself, so that we can then use that to later on scale the size of the UI to roughly match our apparent distance. Because if the UI stays the same screen size, if you walk close it'll get really tiny looking, and you walk far away and it looks huge compared to what it's over, so the distance part is useful to figure out. So, yeah. A example of the map would be, tutorial map. The first one is actor, and the second one is whatever our UI widget is that we're using. In this case, the UI tutorial is what it's called. But the idea is that you will always have one actor on one side, and that will be directly attached to a reference to a specific UI. So what we're doing is we're creating a new user interface widget for every actor in the scene. So right here, we have two actors. So when it starts, it creates one for each of them and now saves these two, and will be every tick updating them. And should I look at one, it will also update that. Well, it should be. I think I broke. Oh, right, yeah, I broke something. Here we are. Delete that, since that was already taking up that spot. So that should have been the cause. Yeah. So now when you look at it, it knows that, and it displays the relevant data. Now let's look at the actual widget itself. So, UI tutorial, here we are.